was NBC's Ryan Nobles with that second report. And it is telling how Democrats are really targeting Musk with a lot of their criticism. And maybe it's having some effect because the number of Republicans who also want Musk to have significant influence in the Trump administration has fallen substantially since Trump was elected. According to a new Economist YouGov poll, 26% of Republicans say that they want Musk to have a, quote, lot of influence. That's down from 47% in November, a steep drop. Meanwhile, 43% want Musk to have, quote, little influence, and 17% say none at all. Additionally, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney took a swipe at Musk on social media earlier this week after Musk wrote interesting in a thread that he reposted that claimed that Cheney, who led Trump's impeachment and the mass imprisonment campaign against thousands of Trump's supporters, was spawned out of USAID. Cheney responded to that saying this: "Damn right, Elon. I'm proud of what America did to win the Cold War, defeat Soviet communism, and defend democracy. Our nation stood for freedom. You may be unfamiliar with that part of our history since you weren't yet an American citizen." So, Joe, some strong pushback here, not just from this Republican, from former Republican Liz Cheney, but from Democrats across Washington, who we've talked a lot about on the show, have had trouble finding their voice here in the early Trump era. But they seem to be finding a rallying cry to say that what Musk is doing is wrong.
Well, yeah, Elon Musk is taking a lot of the heat right now. And, I mean, a pretty big target. Richest guy in the world. Somebody that goes out and does the most outrageous things online. So it is fascinating. And the Liz Cheney back and forth also quite fascinating, too. You're not going to out-conservative Liz Cheney, certainly not on the Cold War. And, of course, Liz reminding everybody Elon wasn't even an American citizen when we were winning the Cold War. And Liz Cheney was doing her job in that. With us now, we have, let's bring in New York Times opinion columnist David French, also former MSNBC host and contributor to Washington Monthly, Chris Matthews. David, I have so many ways I want to go with you here, but why don't we just start because, you know, rhetorical shots were fired there between Liz Cheney and Elon Musk. For those of us who are Cold Warriors, we understood the importance of hard power, the military, and yes, we understood the importance of soft power. We understood the importance of ideas. We understood the importance of aid. I will repeat it for the 1,000th time this week since U.S. aid became an issue on this show. There's a reason why Harry Truman, after attacking Herbert Hoover his entire political life, called in Herbert Hoover after World War II ended and said, "We've got a refugee crisis in Europe. If those people aren't taken care of, we're going to have communism in Western Europe. Go get to work." And now all across Africa, yes, I'm extraordinarily proud of what George W. Bush did with PEPFAR. I'm extraordinarily proud that his evangelical faith pushed him to start a program. And it was his evangelical faith that pushed him to start a program that has saved 25 million lives in Africa. Right now, as of today, that number will continue to grow. So I guess there's a two-pronged question for you here. One, the evangelical side of things, the Matthew 25 side of things. And then secondly, just, yes, we're doing this for all the right reasons, but we're also doing it to help ourselves because we used to get great intel on the Soviets. Now we get great intel on Al-Qaeda, we get great intel on ISIS, we get great intel on China. You name it, USAID gets us on the ground, and people want to be on our side.
Yeah, let's talk about the second part of your question first, because people forget the Cold War wasn't just a military contest. Who had the bigger military? Who had the stronger nuclear deterrent? It was a contest of systems across the entire spectrum, including a moral contest, where our consistent message to the world was the West, led by the United States, is a beacon of freedom in humanitarianism compared to oppression and grinding poverty behind the Iron Curtain. And so this was a contest of systems. And so, yes, absolutely, American foreign aid, America's moral force in the world was a huge part of the Cold War. This just wasn't just a military contest. And to the first part of your question, Joe, look, a lot of Americans do not realize that this Elon Musk effort and USAID and other parts of the government has explicitly targeted evangelical ministries. These are evangelical ministries who fought for years to have the ability to have equal access to funding to help serve the poor, to help serve some of the most vulnerable people in the world. And so what you're seeing is a targeting of some of the best things America's ever done, including, as you're talking about PEPFAR, you're talking about targeting evangelical ministries who serve refugees. This is a comprehensive attack on America's moral and humanitarian standing in the world. And I'm sorry to say, Joe, an awful lot of Americans are standing and cheering every element of this.
And they need to understand what you just said. This isn't like left-wing, quote, Marxists. Again, you look at PEPFAR, that was driven by George W. Bush's faith in Jesus Christ. That's why he was pushing it. Back in the 1990s, I teamed up with Abe Rosenthal, former editor of the New York Times. What did we focus on? The 2 million people getting killed in Sudan, Christian persecution in Sudan, Christian children being sold into slavery for a couple of dollars, Christians being persecuted, crucified in Sudan. And the focus for much of that was through the State Department and U.S. aid, David. Evangelicals, I was there, focused on that. George W. Bush in the 2000s focused on that. This is not about left-wing Marxists. This is in large part about evangelicals like myself on a smaller level, like George W. Bush on a much larger level, like being driven by our faith to help the poorest among us, those people that Jesus would say needed help the most. Now, in a perfect world, would we need a government bureaucracy to do that? In a perfect world, no, we wouldn't. But you know what? When children are starving to death in Sudan, when tens of millions of people are dying across Africa, George W. Bush used PEPFAR being funded through USAID. And Nick Kristof, of all people, Nick Kristof, has had a lot of good things to say about George W. Bush. Nick called it, who I love, Nick called it the single most effective government program of his entire lifetime, because George W. Bush, through his faith, through USAID, through PEPFAR, has saved 25 million souls.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's one of the best things this country has ever done. And as you were saying, it was led by an evangelical conservative president. And look, I want to focus back on these Christian relief agencies that are they're on the verge of being defunded on a mass scale. This is the kind of thing that if the Biden administration had targeted these evangelical and Catholic relief agencies in the same way, this would lead right-wing media day after day, hour after hour, some sort of war on Christians. But then when Elon Musk does it under a Trump administration, then it's okay. Then it's all just fine that these evangelical ministries can be put in a state of crisis. When, again, what are they doing? They're fulfilling the commands they're given almost 2,000 times in Scripture to serve the poor, to serve the vulnerable. This is the kind of thing that for years and years and years growing up in the church it's how we defined ourselves. This was our primary interaction with the world in our service of the poor. And here you have a Republican-led government hitting these Christian relief agencies